Hi everyone, this is Joy with Create It with Joy. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today's card is a super fun Halloween card. I made a really fun background. I had so much fun making it. It's a little bit out of my comfort zone, but it was such a blast. I used a ton of products from Fawn, Simon Says Stamp, Tim Holtz, and so I just can't wait to even get started on this. So the first thing that I did was to start with some distress oxide inks. I did wilted violet, chipped sapphire, and black soot. And I am starting out with Neenah Classic Crest Solar White cardstock and 110-pound weight. So I laid down wilted violet just in the center top card, very messy. Then I'm taking Tim Holtz Distress Resist, but my sprayer wasn't working. So I took it out and threw some dots down. I'm going to take the heat tool to that, or you can set it aside and let it dry. But what I wanted is when I put my next color on top, I wanted the purple color to come through on these dots, if that makes sense. So this Distressed Resist, when you take your next color of ink over the top of it, it's going to resist that color and show you what color was underneath. So if I had done this just on the white cardstock, the white dots would show through. So now most of this background does get covered up when I'm done, but it still was so much fun and I loved how it turned out. So now I'm going to take chipped sapphire and I'm going to work around the edges of this and a little bit over that purple. I'm going to leave a little bit of purple in the center and I'll rework that color again. You know how you do when you blend distress inks. It's just kind of this process over and over and over. So I am doing the rest of the card in chipped sapphire, laying down a good amount, just using a paper towel to keep my fingers out of it because it is nice and messy and you can leave your fingerprints in it and nobody wants that on their card. So still nice and messy. Again, now I'm going to take that wilted violet, come back over the center, and you can see that resist there on that background. So that's just the first start of this distressed background that I made for this card. I took a paper towel and lightly just wiped off, and so you can see those dots there. Cleaning up my mess, we're going to move on to the next thing. So more of that Distress Resist, because now the next color is going to be black soot. So again, I'm going to let that dry. Well, I use my heat tool because I have zero patience for letting things dry. When I'm ready to make something, I'm ready to make it. So that's what I do. So that is dried, and the next step is going to be Simon Says Stamp Polka Dot Party stencil, and I'm taking wilted violet and going back over. I originally just did the dots at the top, and then I decided to do it over the whole thing. Hopefully you guys could see it there just a little bit, but I wanted these soft, this almost bubbly look behind the background, like, I don't know, just feels kind of witchy, if that makes sense. See, so you guys can see the polka dots there in the wilted violet, and it's kind of all over the place. I am going to cover up most of it, but you still see some of it. Adding a little bit more of chipped sapphire around the edges and the bottom. I'm just working this till I get what I like. I really didn't have a full plan. I kind of had an idea of how I wanted it to look, but I was having my fingers crossed that it would turn out that way. So now I'm taking the black soot and going around the edges, making it pretty dark, leaving that center with the chipped sapphire and the wilted violet because I really did want to see those colors. But even though I'm going over those polka dots on the bottom, you still can see the wilted violet, and I was really glad about that. Again, just blending everything out till I get a nice cohesive look on this card. But isn't that fun so far? And it's only going to get more fun, you guys. Now I am spraying on the Distress Spray Stain. It's a black Distress Spray Stain, and it left some little dots. It kind of attached itself to the polka dots that I laid on with the stencil, which I wasn't expecting, but I kind of liked it. And then I took Fawn's liquid Stardust right there and just dropped big droplets. I have to tell you, that was one of my most favorite things on here besides that polka dot stencil. They dropped in perfect droplets. Then I took Imagine's Shimmer Mist and just sprayed just lightly over the whole top. And so now look at this fun background. It's just got these different layers of colors and dots and polka dots, and you can still see the polka dots right down there at the bottom. And I hope that the camera is doing it justice. I mean, in person, I think it looks a little bit better, but I had so much fun making that background. Okay, so on to the next thing. Lawn Fawn's How You Been stamp set. I'm using the jar because for this card, I wanted to have a jar of bats, and I thought that would be such a fun card. And so then I had the dilemma of how do I make this jar look like an old funky glass jar? Actually, it was not too bad. It turned out pretty easy. So now I'm stamping some bats, and I believe this is from Simon Says Stamp Creepy Cute stamp set. And I'm stamping that with Ranger's gray tinted embossing ink, and I'm using Ranger's black embossing powder. And I'm just going to emboss these bats. I did a bunch more, and then I'm just going to cut them out by hand. I didn't want any white edges. So I'm just going to cut those out, and they are going to be inside of our jar. So I'm going to heat those up, melt that embossing powder. These bats have little faces on them. Some of them showed faces, some of them didn't. I think it's just how hard I pressed down on that stamp. It didn't even really matter. So now we're going to get on to coloring this jar to make it look kind of old and grungy. I used warm gray markers, W1, 3, 4, 6, and 7. And I also used a tad bit of YR27 and 24, which is kind of a rusty orange, rusty yellow orange, basically is what it looks like. So I am just going and I'm coloring really dark on the outside, and then I'll color the rest of it all the way through on this jar. You could, if you wanted to, cut an opening in this jar and have your bats behind it and make a shaker card, and that would be super cute. I just really want it to look old and grungy, but also be able to clearly see the bats through it. You could use vellum that kind of a way, but I wanted to see the bats clearly, so I opted to not do that. So I am taking the darker of the W markers, 6 and 7, and adding some really dark around the rim and the lid because I do want that to be a lot darker. Adding the shadows, adding the shading, blending all of that out. And I will do the same exact thing for the lid. Letting my jar dry, so I'm kind of going back and forth, and once it dries I can kind of see, do I need it to be darker here, darker there? And so I kept going back and forth that way, and really I was really super happy with how this jar turned out. I did a little bit of the YR27 and 24 to give it, I know that glass doesn't have rust, but kind of that just funky, crusty stuff that sometimes gets on old jars. So that's what I used that color for. So here again, I'm adding a little dark areas in certain spots after I've already blended. And so far now it looks like a nice gray kind of jar. Here is the YR27 and 24. I can't see which one that is on my playback screen here, but I added both of them, and then I would go back over with the W marker and kind of blend it out and soften that so it was not so harsh. Added a little bit to the lid and added a little bit to the top of the jar. Now I'm coming back with my W darker markers, adding some dots, adding a little more color to the corners and the edges, and it just really was a work of art. And I think this is kind of where it came to life and felt a little bit more like an old funky jar that I needed it to be. I think projects like this are kind of freeing in a way when you're supposed to make it look all old and gross. I don't know that you can really mess up on something like that. So this and that background was really kind of out of my comfort zone, and I have to say I had so much fun doing it, and I cannot wait to do more. So just adding a few last touches here and there. I will use the coordinating die to cut this out, but really wanting to add some dark shadows to the edges, and you just take your time and get it to how you like it to look. Because this may be too dark for one of you guys. You may not like it like this, but for me, I loved it. So now I'm taking some orange cardstock from Cardstock Warehouse. I think this is from their autumn pack. And I'm taking the black soot and going around the edge. Now, when I did this first edge, I did it too dark, I thought, at the beginning. And I didn't love it. So I actually had flipped it over and did it lighter on the back side. But then I ended up using this darker side. My son was like, no, Mom, use the darker. So that's what I did. Okay, so now I'm going to make some tags for this card. Again, there's that orange cardstock. And I have used Cartabella's Halloween Night stamp set because it says October 31st. And I loved that it said that. So I wanted this jar to have a couple tags. So I'm going to stamp that with some embossing ink. And I used the Ranger's gray tinted embossing ink and some of the black embossing powder. I'm going to heat that up, and then I'm just going to trim that down and just kind of hand cut a tag out of it. So, and it's a big tag, but I love that it says October 31st. I'm also going to stamp the word boo, and I am using Wilted Violet for that because I did want to have a little more purple on this card. I will distress both of these tags so it doesn't really even look like it's on white cardstock. Now, Happy Halloween. I'm masking it off because I want it to be a long sentiment rather than stacked on top of each other. So I am blocking it off. I'm going to use my embossing ink. I prepped that black cardstock really well with my powder bag. Cleaning off my stamp really good. Now I'm going to line up the word Halloween next to it. Do the same thing, mask off the word happy. Ink that up, stamp it down, and then I'm going to use white embossing powder, and then I'll heat emboss that. You can also cut apart your stamps if that's something that you want to do, and sometimes I do that, but a lot of times it's just quick and easy just to mask it off and move it. So that's a great way to make your stamps and your sentiments go further, is by masking things off and changing the orientation. So here I'm just trimming up what are going to be my little tags and my sentiment. And I'm going to cut a flag end on that one that says October 31st. And then this boo one is going to be super simple. I am going to be using some black twine. So I will need to punch some holes into these tags. So I'm just using a hole punch. But I'm going to distress these before I do all of that. So I'm just taking black soot, going around the edges, nothing fancy, nothing crazy. I did like how this orange, this is like a great orange color, and so I really wanted that to kind of pop on the card. And then for the little tag boo, I'm going to really cover that in the black soot because I don't want a lot of white on this card other than the sentiment. So just doing that up, and those are good. Punching the hole, and then I realized I punched the wrong end on boo because of what side of the card it was going to be on. So I punched in the other side and I had a hole, but it still worked. I wasn't even worried about it. So I'm going to wrap this twine around the jar a couple times, glue it in place, and I'm just using a little bit of liquid glue. You could use a tape runner, anything like that, whatever works for you. I'm tying a little knot, and then I'm going to run my tags through. And then this is where I realized that I punched the hole on the wrong side of the tag for boo. So I just punched another one, no big deal. So that's how it's going to sit off to the side. I want that tag to hang off of the side of the card. And I didn't like the boo on the other side because it was going to cover up all the bats, and so I did not want that. So we're going to run that through, tie a little knot, and I will also be using some foam tape adhesive to get these exactly where I want them on the card. So there is the orange background paper because the purple background paper was cut slightly smaller than an A2 size card base. So I did want to have a frame. I put some foam tape behind the jar because I did want some dimension for that. And I'm going to get that set up and decide where I want my Happy Halloween to be. And I did not center the jar because I've got this big tag off of the side. So the orientation is a little bit to the right, but I really like how that turned out. And then the lid will be on the top with a little bit of foam tape, and it's going to be just open a little bit because these bats will be escaping out of this jar. I just imagine it's just some witch that collected these little bats, and who knows what she's going to do with them, but they're not having it and they're leaving. So I'm going to attach that to that lid up to the top, deciding how I want my sentiment. Again, the sentiment's actually not going to be centered either, but I think it totally works. because I've got that big tag off to the left. The sentiment will not be popped up with foam tape. I just want the jar to be that. So a little bit of tape runner and I will adhere that down. I am just loving how this card is coming together. The look of it is so much fun. So I did a little bit of foam tape behind the tag and behind the boo. And I will adhere that down. Now I'm just gluing in all the bats using some liquid adhesive. I glue all the bats into the jar, one coming out of the jar, and then the one at the top left-hand corner will be on foam tape, and that will be popped up with some dimension. So the bats look like they're getting ready to fly out. So cute, so much fun. I just really, really love this Halloween card. Getting the foam tape on there. Now I'm going to be taking, I want to add some more dots. So I'm using Nuvo Crystal Drops in Ebony Black and Liquid Pearls in Onyx Pearl. And I'm just kind of putting those all around, some inside the jar, some on the background. Just at the top, I did not do any of that on the bottom portion of the card. But I felt like it needed some more dots, some more black. Isn't that the most fun card? Great dimension, great shine, great sparkle. The background looks great. It feels very Halloween, very witchy. You could always cut that corner off if you didn't want that. You know, if you put it in an A2 size envelope and it wouldn't fit, you can always cut that corner off, but I left it open. Thank you guys so much for stopping by. I hope that you really enjoyed this card. I had so much fun making it. Thank you guys for all of your support. Please thumbs up, subscribe, like, share, leave me comments. I love it. I do have some affiliate links below. It costs you nothing, but it helps me. So thank you so much for using them, and I'll be back soon. Bye.